Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
So today we welcome Andrew D'Souza on the show, co-founder and CEO of ClearBank, now ClearCo. Andrew's had an illustrious career as a COO, a CRO, and has various other interludes along the way, which we'll certainly get into. One of the reasons we were so keen to have Andrew on the show was the way he's reinventing the investment space. All you need to do is go to their homepage and see a quote from none other than Gary Vaynerchuk saying that ClearCo is a game changer. You don't need to put up your house, drown in credit cards, or give up a piece of your baby to fund ads and inventory, which is quite the accolade. So look, welcome to today's show, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, let's kick off from the top. I mean, take us through a bit about your background, your career, your education, like what brought you to this space? Because it's unusual to be, kind of at investment in your career. It's a different path. So how did you end up here? What were some of the points of inflection along the way, if you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I've always had a bit of a nomadic life. I was an immigrant. I was born in India. My mom is from Kenya, and moved to Toronto via Chicago when I was a kid. So grew up outside of Toronto, and ended up studying engineering, systems engineering. And I always liked how things fit together. I always liked how sort of complex systems fit, and different domains, and that was sort of why engineering and particularly systems was interesting to me. And I thought I was going to build and design cars early in my career, and after a couple internships at GM, realized that was probably not in my future. So graduated, worked at McKinsey in management consulting for a couple of years, and also realized, as interesting as that work was intellectually, I still like building things. And so fortunate enough to meet a fellow immigrant Canadian Waterloo graduate named Chamath, pretty early in my career. He was head of growth at Facebook at the time, back in 2010. And he sort of convinced me to move out to Silicon Valley, just as sort of venture capital was starting to come back into the ecosystem. And it was either sort of, hey, come join my team at Facebook, which might have been a more lucrative choice at the time, or join this 4-person startup that I'm on the board of. And so moved out to San Francisco, and there were a couple of things that were interesting realizations for me. One was just the difference in opportunity afforded to founders and entrepreneurs who lived within sort of 50 miles of Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, compared to all of my friends in Canada that were starting businesses, or in Europe, or in India, or Asia, or anywhere else in the world. And that was, it was because they went to the same parties, they'd gone to the same schools, and they hung out in the same networks. The access to capital was so much easier. The access to media and press that's associated with that, and customers and talent, and all the sort of externalities of being anointed by a Silicon Valley VC, made their lives much easier as founders. They weren't more talented, they weren't more ambitious or hardworking. They were just, they just happened to be in the right proximity. And so from that point, the idea of leveling the playing field for founders around the world had always been, a subplot in my career. Okay.
So tell us what it is you're doing now and what you're so passionate about.
Yeah, so what I did from that point, I ended up moving back to Canada. Joined a couple of startups, and my first job was to help them scale and raise money. So I was sort of like move back to Canada, and then get back on a plane and go raise money, and did that a couple times, and ended up being a bit of this sort of conduit between Silicon Valley venture and the Canadian tech ecosystem. And that's actually how I ended up meeting my partner, Michelle. She was raising money for her past company, and I was sort of, we met up and introduced her to a few investors along that journey. But a couple things happened, through that process. I joined the company. We ended up, they needed to raise money very quickly, so we did a sort of shotgun wedding approach, brought on a new investor. That investor had very different plans for the company, and so as soon as we sort of missed a quarter, they sort of brought in their own management team and brought in their own team, and so then I came home, and Michelle. Michelle and I had been dating for probably about 4 months at the time, and I came home and said, "Hey, I think I've lost my job." And she's like, "Oh, this is great. We can go start a company now." And it was, it was interesting. We had thought about, do we want to start a VC fund? Because we both loved supporting entrepreneurs and, investing in them. She had just joined, so that company that she was working on, she'd sold to Groupon and just joined the cast of Dragon's Den in Canada, and was investing on that show, and sort of realized that the world didn't need another VC fund at the time. And so we looked at different ways of supporting founders and supporting entrepreneurs, and realized that most entrepreneurs that we met probably didn't need to be giving up ownership and control, at least not that early and not that much. And so what we started to do was say, okay, well, what if we could get a return, and get an exit without having to force the business to sell, or without having to take a board seat or equity. And so what we invented was really this category of, performance financing, revenue financing against repeatable expenses. And so at ClearCo, what we do now is we fund you. Let's say you're an e-commerce or a software business, you're spending money on, marketing and inventory or infrastructure. We will fund the repeatable expenses. So let's say you need $100,000, €100,000 for your business, to spend on customer acquisition. We'll fund you that. We'll take 5% of revenue, or whatever percent of revenue makes sense based on your scale, until we get 106 back, and we can just continue to do that. And we can go anywhere from 10,000 to 10 million, and we're working on ways to go even above that. So those are the types of things that we're focused on, is just providing alternative forms of financing, so you don't need to give up equity or control of your business, and you don't need to give up security and personal guarantee or anything for your business either. And now we're really starting to invest in ways of helping these companies figure out how to spend their money, access a network, all the things that VCs do. We're just trying to use technology to do that at much, much bigger scale, instead of doing that with humans who only have a certain amount of experience and a certain amount of hours in the day.
So Andrew, can I take you back to your first, let's say your first 10 customers, kind of your beta folks that you're testing the model, because obviously you had a hypothesis originally, and you needed market validation on the hypothesis, and some tanked and some were validated, I'm sure, and then new ones come along based on the iterative process, and kind of optimizing what you were doing. But can you share with us some of the early days for you, maybe some of the infliction and some of the inflection points in that journey?
It was certainly a journey, and we looked at all kinds of different entrepreneurs. In the early days, we had actually started with gig economy and sharing economy businesses. So we did a partnership with Uber in the very early days to fund Uber drivers, which were sort of micro businesses. I think we realized that Uber drivers couldn't use capital to really grow their business. Then we'd done a bunch of work in the vacation rental space with Airbnb and HomeAway. And, that was actually interesting, because you could deploy that. You could actually build a, sizable property management business on top of vacation rental platforms, but also sort of realized that those businesses start to plateau at a certain point. And then I think what happened was we started to meet these, e-commerce founders, and a lot of them came from Dragon's Den, and a lot of that inspiration came from the show, where we were seeing these entrepreneurs from across the country who were, selling. They come on the show, they say, look, I need $100,000 for marketing. I'm willing to give up 40% of my business to get that. And we sort of started scratching our heads and saying, like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that was sort of where we started to come up with this revenue share model for e-commerce. And I remember, distinctly, I think our very first business was this military veteran from Baltimore who was, he was trying to build a murder mystery subscription box, and didn't know a VC, didn't know how to raise money. He was really, intelligent, talented guy, really passionate about what he was doing. And we started funding him, and, This is now 4 or 5 years later, but he's got a $25 million plus business that I think he owns all of, and has continued to grow. And so we've certainly had some fantastic businesses that have come through from the early days, and we've got a few that'll probably go public in the next year. And so we're really proud of some of those early businesses that happen to be some of the first ones that we met.
Yeah, this is really cool. I'm going to stay on this for a minute, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Specifically, kind of what you guys do and the product. When you talk about, you told us earlier that you really automate a lot of the process with respect to investment, etc. You obviously have a different means by which you invest, i.e., it's not overly punitive for the organization that is receiving the capital by way of, equity, et cetera, Is a lot of that process, the automation and stuff, is a lot of that around the due diligence process, or specifically what are you automating?
Yeah, so it's everything from the offer to the due diligence, right? So if you think about the way that it typically works when you go to a VC, I think step one is you need a warm introduction, right? The VCs rarely take cold emails because they get so much volume. And so they can't process it. So they need some sort of filter. So what they use is their network as a filter. And so you need a warm introduction to a VC, then you set up some time, you go through a pitch deck, you go through a series of pitches with, maybe a junior VC, then a partner, then a full partnership, and they ask more questions. And it's sort of a, several month process from you deciding you want to go raise money to money being in your bank. If you're successcul.
If you're lucky, it's a several months process.
That's right. Exactly.
It takes longer than that sometimes.
I mean, there are people who have been raising money for years, or just aren't, not, they're not businesses that VCs are interested in investing in. What we do is we sort of flip that and we say, look, let us actually just make the decision on data alone. You don't need a warm introduction to us. You don't need to pitch us. You literally just, sign onto the website, connect your data, and you get an offer in minutes. And there's certainly people to talk through, and we know that the model is novel, and so people have questions, and we have an investment team that will talk you through the offers, but you don't need to pitch them on why your business is worthwhile, because what we believe is if you have customers and you know how to find those customers, then your business is worth investing in. And we don't, if you think of VC as sort of a scarcity mentality to investing, we've tried to take an abundance mentality where there's certainly more than enough capital out there, and we can amass as much capital as we need to invest in all of the good businesses out there. And
but just because you have a large access to a large market, and I'm sure these are all parts of your criterion, right? That it has to be a relatively big market that you're going after, et cetera. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to execute effectively. How do you legislate for that?
Yeah, so we look at the capital efficiency of the business. So you sort of say, do you have a machine where you can put $1 in and you can get more than $1 out? Okay. And where do you put it? So we understand, when you invest in a piece of inventory, how long does that take to sell off your website? When you invest in an ad, how efficiently does that ad convert? And so really what we're trying to do is identify businesses that have found product market fit and are looking at sort of investing to scale and have sort of a right side up business model, regardless of whether or not we agree with the products, or we would purchase the products ourselves. And I think this is one of the interesting things that we find. We've invested in people who are building products for specific sort of diabetic or kids with autistic children, or a certain skin condition. We've invested in a bunch of businesses, for sexual wellness and sex toy companies and things. And, these are all just categories that a typical VC just won't invest in, either because they can't relate to, or, they're categories that just are off the beaten path. But, for us, it's just about, are you solving a problem that people have, and do you know how to find those people in a profitable way? And if you do, we're not going to pass judgment on whether or not your business should exist.
So in terms of how you've legislated for that, you've automated that, how do you find that impacts on your success rate on kind of picking winners? Don't share numbers if you're not comfortable, but what does that look like in your ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, because look, the biggest thing is our business model requires, 99% of the companies to be successful. We don't make more than 6% on any deal. Whereas a VC, you could invest in Facebook or Uber or something, and the rest of your portfolio could go to zero and you'd still return your fund several times over. And so that's really what a VC is looking for. And so we're sort of inverted in that way, where you say, look, we actually need the vast majority, almost every single one of our companies, to be successful for our business model to work. And so we do everything we can to help these companies survive, thrive, achieve their objectives. And so beyond the capital, we're really starting to say, okay, well, maybe your return on ad spend is positive, or maybe your inventory turn cycle looks good, but you could be doing better. Here's a partner that we've seen help similar businesses like yours. Maybe it's an agency, maybe it's a piece of software, maybe it's a new channel you should be trying. But we're really, we're sort of in the passenger seat alongside these founders, trying to help them be more successful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke with a candidate only 2 days ago, and she had said she's just signed with you guys to start. And I was like, damn it, you got there, you got to her before I did, I guess. But that's great. And she was speaking incredibly highly of you, and I would rate her very highly as a candidate also. And she had said that you're really shaking things up. And what stands out for me there is, 6% seems super reasonable. And it seems like it's very reasonably priced money as well compared to a bank loan, right? So it seems to me, and the way I'm reading this is, your VC is your 1 in 10, 3 in 10, multiples, therefore uncovered kind of model. Your bank is a little bit of a higher interest rate, and I don't think the bank get it right that often, and they're asking for personal guarantees and all that kind of stuff. So how are you able to be so reasonable? And secondly, like, how do you stipulate what they spend the money on? Is there a breakdown there?
Yeah, so a big part of it is data, right? And so what we try and do is use data to mitigate our risk and identify the businesses that, are working online. I think VCs use a lot of gut and intuition. And so on one, if you think of sort of your capital options, on one end of the spectrum, you've got equity, which is, look, we're not anti-VC. We've obviously taken some VC, along our journey. We've taken a lot more non-dilutive capital in the form of sort of credit funds and things, but we've taken some equity capital, and we think it's, equity works really well when you're investing in things like R&D and product development. If you're inventing something new, if you're trying to put a rocket on Mars, if you're trying to cure a disease, if you're trying to create something that the world has never seen before and it may or may not work, equity capital is a great source of capital for that. But when you're investing in things that are repeatable, then it starts to feel very expensive. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got banks and debt, and there's a place for debt, but it comes to, banks are really in the business of loaning against assets, right? And so this is why they do mortgages very well, because your home is an asset. So if you're buying, assets with tangible value and tangible resale value, maybe you're buying equipment or things that, that are easy to liquidate in case the bank calls the loan, then banks can be a very low cost of capital. The challenge is most online businesses don't have a lot of assets, or at least not a lot of assets that banks can value, in which case they go after the personal assets of the founder with a personal guarantee, which is one of the toughest, most aggressive terms out there. And I think a lot of founders don't necessarily recognize that. And so what we try to do is create something that sort of sat in the middle. We don't care about the assets of the business. We're not going to come after them. We're not going to take you into bankruptcy. We're not going to go after, your business or personal assets, because we're really not in the business of liquidating assets from founders or people. What we really care about is the future revenue potential of the business. And so we sort of sit in between that asset-backed bank and that sort of equity, equity upside ownership, where we've been able to use the data to figure out how likely this business is to continue to generate revenue at an increasing pace.
Okay, and in terms of the types of business you go after, I noticed you showcased a healthy option cereal company at the on your homepage there as well, which kind of
Magic Spoon. Yep.
Great idea, so simple. I can't believe no one's done it yet. So for me, that sounds like a very repeatable model. But maybe is there a theme developing in your portfolio that you feel has naturally kind of just organically developed, or do you specifically feel more comfortable in a particular space in terms of those repeatable businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we look for, it's really, I mean, we try and be as broad as possible, but it's really about online businesses where you find your customers online, they pay you online, you deliver your product or service online. So those could be software businesses, those could be, e-commerce businesses. We haven't been able to figure out, we haven't been able to help businesses that are more brick and mortar, where your growth is limited to your geography. This is one of the things that we really help founders think through is geographic and international expansion. How do they sell in new countries? How do they grow internationally? How do they find new channels? And so, a lot of those end up being e-commerce businesses. Some of the most repeatable ones certainly are consumables and subscription type businesses. So especially during the pandemic over the past year, we've seen a lot of success in, whether those are CPG, like food and beverage, health and toiletries and home care type things, pet foods and things like that, like things that, people want to find a product or service they like, and they just want it to keep coming every week or every month. Those types of businesses do really well, but we also have lots of businesses that are, they're selling a mattress, or they're selling, clothing. We've got a lot of, fashion and beauty businesses. And then we've got an increasing number of, B2B software companies, and SaaS businesses as well that sell software and services online. And are also just like, we don't want to, we've got a repeatable model. It takes X number of months for us to break even on a new customer, and we don't want to give up more equity to VCs to grow faster. And so that's been an emerging business for us that's really starting to get to scale.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's I wouldn't say it's a hidden economy, but there's so many businesses that are just born online, and they wouldn't be very apparent to folks that would want to kind of target them or find them, or some of these. It's incredible, some of the names of organizations that wouldn't be household names that are doing 300-400 million in top line. It's insane. And I mean, I looked at this a few years ago because a friend of mine had a data contextual platform that helped organizations identify those companies. They had, some kind of scraping technology, and they were able to say that, if you were if you were a delivery person, or you were in the merchant services business, it would be able to tell you that they use, Stripe or MasterCard or whatever would be their merchant service provider. So you could go in there knowing that information, in terms of, but there's so many other things these people buy. And everything from staplers to photocopiers to what, I don't know if people buy photocopiers anymore, but all of that kind of stuff. I'm curious, in terms of your GTM, how do you find customers? Is it like inbound, outbound? What's the biggest way that you get your message out there, get in front of people? Because I would imagine you're intercepting people that are already on a journey that maybe have been kind of, doing a bit of a Texas two-step with some, seed investors or some VCs already. And then kapow, you come along with your message or whatever. How are you getting customers? How do you find customers right now?
Yeah, so it's a few different channels. It's certainly inbound. We've invested a lot in sort of building the brand and press, and so we get a lot of just organic sort of inbound. We do some inbound marketing. We have channel partners. We work with a lot of VCs actually, who when they meet a company that they know they're not going to invest in, or they might want to invest in, but they don't want to invest the full amount. Like they don't want VCs don't want their money going into Google and Facebook ads, right? Or into inventory. They want their money going into R&D and high leverage activities. And so a lot of VCs will bring us into deals. Ad agencies are another great channel for us. They bring us into a lot of companies that they know are seeing great results, but just need more budget. And then we have an outbound team. So we have a team that goes and identifies these companies, and we've got a research team that identifies them and finds the ones that are growing, and we reach out and offer to help. And so those are sort of the main channels for us, and continuing to evolve and continuing to invest in. But we've got sort of a few different repeatable channels that we're just starting to scratch the surface of.
Cool. I'm curious about what drives you personally, Andrew, if you don't mind me asking. I read somewhere, I forget where it is, that you were involved in some what I wouldn't say obscure, but I'd say definitely different endeavor, where you got on a plane with 99 other folks and came up with some ideas, transatlantic or whatever, and those kind of things, are very, very interesting, to come up with some ideas, around innovation and kind of solving real world problems, and which invariably you're doing here, and adding tremendous value to tons and tons and tons of companies globally. But what drives you personally to do this? Is it do you have a competitive streak? Is there something lacking in your life? Do you have a big hole to fill, or what drives you to do this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of just see the potential in people, and look, I was very fortunate. My parents took a big risk. They didn't have very, very much, and we lived very paycheck to paycheck in the early years of being sort of new immigrants to a new country. But
what did your parents do? What did your dad work at, by the way?
My dad is an engineer.
Okay.
My dad's an engineer. My mom is a teacher. And so I was, so I learned a lot, actually. I think I'm a pretty good blend of both of them. My mom is one of these people who, you go to the grocery store and she'll chat up sort of half the store by the time you're out of there, and love sort of making these connections. And my dad is very methodical and very sort of structured and rigid, and an excellent sort of structured problem solver. But I think about sort of the different paths my life could have taken, if I wasn't exposed to certain opportunities. And I sort of realized that there are probably millions, maybe billions of people that sort of live in the same, in the same situation, where they've got sort of talent and ambition, work ethic, and they're just never going to be exposed to that level of opportunity. And I think there's this untapped, latent entrepreneurial energy that, there could be another 100,000 Elon Musks in sub-Saharan Africa, right, or in Southeast Asia that could solve major world problems, and we'll just never hear from them. Right, and with a little bit of the
one right Elon Musk is enough for the planet at the moment.
maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. But do you know what I mean? Like, I think that if you think about the way that humanity's biggest problems are going to be solved, it's probably not going to be coordinated. It's not going to be the G8 coming together and saying, hey, we're going to try and solve climate change. They'll never get along. We're going to try and solve aging, or war or disease, whatever. Like, it's going to be entrepreneurs that have a creative vision, that are willing to take some risk. And I think that, if it can only be the people who are in certain circles, who have figured out this sort of venture capital, private equity game, who have a shot at doing that, then I think we're missing out on a lot of advancement for humanity. And so, I think that's probably what drives me the most, is just, is there a way for us to do this, and do this at a scale that's never been thought of, to fund 1 million founders around the world and give them the support and resources that they would if they were backed by a Sequoia or an Andreessen Horowitz or something, and give them a shot at actually sort of creating the world that they set out to.
Love it. Power to the people. I believe you too. If you don't mind me saying that was hugely authentic, and because honestly, we have all kinds of folks on the show, and I talk to all kinds of people every day, and I think about 75% of them are authentic, to be honest with you, But I really heard you on that, and what a noble endeavor. Hat tip to you, sir, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I'm not,
right, and making some money, I would wager too.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's enjoyable work. It's rewarding work. I'm having a blast. I love my team. We get to sort of try and invent the future, or at least set up the infrastructure for the people who are going to invent the future. So don't shed any tears for me on it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. So someone in your position as a leader, and in essence, that is what you are really, and a damn good one by the looks of things, So for us, our general feeling, and as unbiased as we can be here, our general feeling is we feel the number one most important thing a leader can do is hire the right people. And if that's the only thing you do right, then everything else is easier. Tell us a little bit about how you hire or assemble your teams.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like my job is to hire people who are much better than me, and then just sort of get out of their way. But yeah, it's been interesting because of our mission and because of the impact that we're aiming to have. The type of people that are attracted to the company are entrepreneurial people. Many people, almost everybody has their own founder story. They started a business. Maybe they started a lemonade stand, or they started one of our team members started like a hair extension business in high school selling to her friends. And, but everybody's got or they come from an entrepreneurial family, or they have ambitions of starting a business. So, we're about 330 people now. And so, you put 330 founders into a room and try and get them to all point in the same direction. And that a little bit of chaos ensues. But I think it's because many people have seen the struggle of being an outsider, trying to create the future, trying to create something, and the mission really resonates with them. We've got a lot of people who come to ClearCo and with the intention of leaving and starting a business, and in almost every case, it's probably happened now 10 times now, and almost every case we've invested in them and tried to set them up to go. And so there's almost this sort of couple of year tour of duty that people come in for, and then they're like, well, I'm going to go start my own business. And we're like, this is fantastic, because we want to go create more founders in the world. And so that's been a lot of the culture has been very entrepreneurial. We try and eliminate a lot of bureaucracy. We try a lot of things. Not all of them work. But fortunately enough, we're resourced enough resourced well enough to be able to try many things, and every so often something really compelling hits, and we double down on it. And that's been sort of the culture we've tried to convey, and still I have to admit I'm still figuring out. And if you have any advice on Zoom leadership and remote leadership, that is something that was never in my toolkit as a leader. I think I much prefer being in front of a team and at company retreats and things like that, talking about the mission, than trying to do it over Zoom. But we've had to adapt and figure that out, and the ability to hire amazing talent from every corner of the world has certainly has offset my lack of effectiveness over a remote screen. But that's been one of the biggest challenges, really, is maintaining that culture. We had an incredible energy in our office every day, and we've sort of been missing that for the last year and a bit since we've gone remote.
I think there's a book in that, Andrew, and I think it's probably being written by somebody right now as we speak. Effective Zoom leadership for the growing startup or budding entrepreneur. I think that's definitely certainly a blog article. I'd be certain of that, if not a book in the making. And one of the other kind of profound things that struck me there is, how do you create an incubator effectively and encourage an entrepreneur? Well, the first thing you do is hire them into your company. Sounds like as the way to go, which is a very kind of reverse engineered or a flipping on its head type of model, which it was exciting. And one of the things I wanted to focus on as well, from a hiring perspective, is your growth and your international expansion. So we would work with a lot of folks who are growing, and EMEA seems to be the first place you go to. It's the world's largest market in the European Union, etc. And we've covered this topic on multiple shows in the past. But just before we started recording here, Andrew, we were chatting around location, right? And you guys have chosen Dublin through no influence of our own whatsoever. As I said before we started, we're relatively agnostic, but we are somewhat patriotic in that regard. So, we've listed out some of the top European locations to set up shop, but I'm curious to know your journey and why you picked Dublin, if you could share.
Yeah, the last trip I took before the pandemic was we looked at Dublin, Amsterdam, London. London was a challenge just because they were exiting the European Union, and so Dublin was great because it was the only English speaking country in the EU, and we got some great we got a great tour from the IDA and sort of understood sort of how other tech companies had done this. And there's a great group of talent both in sales and in engineering and product to tap into. A lot of people want to move from other parts of Europe to Ireland, and so that was very appealing. The other thing though is that we thought we were going to have one sort of central European hub, and I don't think we need to anymore. And so we are also hiring people in the Netherlands. We're also, we will likely hire people across Europe over the course of the next 12 months, because we also see the value in having, local language speaking, and you can get, the nice thing is you can also get almost every major European language, proficiency in Dublin. But we also see value in having people on the ground in key markets as sort of things start to get maybe not quite back to normal and in person, but a little bit more. And so we will be hiring. We'll be hiring across Europe, but as our sort of primary hub, it's looking to be Dublin for the foreseeable future. And so it's spending time there. It was a fantastic experience, and you could feel sort of the entrepreneurial energy there and the talent, and the ambition that that people experience every day.
That's great to hear that you had that experience. Testament to the IDA, who we had on the show at the beginning of this season. So all credit to them. And I know that the rules are going to be, the jury's still out on the new rule book from a global tax perspective, that the G7 are agreeing right now at a flat 15%, which is only 2.5 above our baseline rate, but or headline rate, should I say. But I think the talent and the track record as well speak volumes. You've got this ecosystem of folks who are already here. As you rightly said, the languages are also here as well. And I'm curious to know, like, as you expand internationally, what do you find are the nuances when you're approaching maybe European businesses or even businesses in APAC, by way of, their kind of setup, maybe their culture as well? And I know you spoke really at the beginning of the show, having spent time in Silicon Valley, it's just the ecosystem there and the access to capital is more plentiful. Like, what do you think is going to be different in Europe as you establish and grow your footprint here too, if you could share?
Yeah, I think what happens in Europe is, it's just a different venture capital market, different banking market. So the alternatives that exist for founders look very different. And you're starting to see, I think some European investors move a little bit slowly. They're a little bit more hesitant. And so founders are used to a little bit more of a measured approach in coming up with, and deciding how they want to capitalize their business. They may not be used to somebody moving as quickly as we do, certainly. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of that cultural nuance that we're coming across. I think there's certainly some skepticism around international companies coming into Europe, and so we want to have local organizations, local talent, local partners. That's another big thing for us, is working with companies. And look, I mean, we don't think of ourselves as a Canadian or an American company. I mean, we've always thought of ourselves as a global company. And this is one of the things about being Canadian, is like, our team probably speaks 50 different languages and comes from, I'd say less than 50% of our team is probably born in North America. And so we've always operated as a global company. We just happen to have the majority of the team located in Canada. And so, hopefully that cultural sensitivity comes across, whether you're talking to somebody in, Canada or Dublin or London or, Singapore. And so I think that's one of the things. There's also some strange nuances we've started to uncover. Like there's countries in Asia where equity investments come with personal guarantees. And so, if your business fails, they come after your own personal assets, your family's assets. Like it can get pretty ugly. And so there's a lot of skepticism around how investors work in different countries. And so, I think what we're trying to do is rewrite the rules and say, like, this is sort of a new world. We're going to have to probably break a bunch of stereotypes around how investors partner with founders in different countries and what that dynamic looks like. The idea of founders being in control of their own companies when they take on external investment is novel in a lot of countries, and so it'll be a journey, but I think it's one that's worth us pursuing.
Yeah, you're definitely pushing some open doors, and you will be in this jurisdiction anyway. I can absolutely guarantee you that. Out of curiosity, what's an average kind of sales cycle length for you guys? To me, it would seem that you can get information fairly instantaneously. So, I mean, is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, longer?
Oh yeah, it's relatively short. It's a matter of weeks. I mean, we can, again, we get an offer in front of people in minutes, and then it's just about sort of helping them understand that, if they have other investors or other shareholders, they've got to sort of talk it through with. But usually it's a few weeks is when people need to make a decision.
Wow. So you're in terms of velocity, it's kind of a high velocity motion, and which means you guys can, in that land grab, you can certainly move fairly swiftly. Do you have any competition in this space, Andrew?
Yeah, we've seen it's been like flattering for sure. We've seen since we launched a number of similar companies that are trying to tackle individual markets pop up, right? So it's the ClearCo of the UK or of Latin America or of India and things. So we've certainly seen people sort of replicate the model, and that's awesome. It's flat. More options for founders is better. More people sort of, it's not an industry until you've got different people doing it. I do think that there is advantage to scale, both in terms of access to capital. Like, we can grow with companies indefinitely. We've got more data to be able to help these companies make better decisions, and we've got sort of a global network. So I think as companies start to think about themselves expanding out of that one jurisdiction, we end up being a really good partner to help them grow sort of globally wherever they want to.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a concept I learned. I think I was about 8 years of age when my father was saying it was a very busy street where we lived, and there was I think there was some burger joint, and he was saying, well, if you open a burger joint, where would you open? And I said, well, I'd put it miles away from that place. And he said, why would you not put it right beside it? And the logic then, kind of the penny dropped with me, that if you have the footfall and you have the market, it's an absolutely obvious place to put it. Because you'd be guaranteed that if one place was busy, other people will be coming into your place, and so on and so forth. But look, as we round the corner here, and honestly, I can't believe we're 50 minutes into this podcast already, because genuinely, you're a pleasure to talk with, Andrew, and we could go another hour here easily. But as we round the corner, can I ask you what you feel your superpower is? What do you bring to the table that is I suppose is amplified more than all of your other abilities? I'm sure you have a ton of abilities, and one of them not being your ability to lead on Zoom, but apart from that, what's your superpower? Would it be around kind of building teams and people? Would it be around the product kind of engineering, or is it commercially focused or operationally focused or whatever?
Yeah, look, I certainly have many shortcomings. I'd say one of the things that I probably do better than most is I make these sort of non-obvious connections, and I do that often with people, but sometimes with products as well. And it's this idea of you meet somebody and you see something, you hear something about them, you see something about them, and you sort of it may not be on their resume, or it may not be on their career history, may not even be on the job that they're applying for, but you sort of see, well, actually, they might be a better fit somewhere else. And so many times we've moved people. We moved one of our salespeople into a recruiting and talent role, and she absolutely destroyed it. We moved somebody from a revenue operations role into a learning and development role, and again, she's outstanding. I moved our general counsel into kind of a core operational role, and he's excelling, incredibly well. And so, I think that's one of the things that, and maybe it's the combination of systems engineering where you sort of put pieces together, probably comes a lot from my mom, who remembers things about like obscure facts about people, and brings them up, years later, when she's looking for a gift or something. So, that's one of the things. My brain just sort of works in that way to meet somebody, see or hear something about them, and sort of find like, hey, there could be something interesting for you to do in this, in this realm. And every so often that works its way into product as well. It's sort of like, hey, did we ever think about putting these two, this piece of software and this piece of capital together and, into this novel way. So, so every so often that comes, into the product creative process as well. But I'd say it mostly comes into the people and the organizational development side.
I wanted to just finish out by thanking you for all of what you've covered today. But before we do that, how does a man like you relax and switch your brain off? Because it sounds like you're never not busy.
I'm trying to be less busy. I think if I do my job right and I've got the right people, I can have more unstructured time to sort of think and spend time with my team. I haven't achieved it yet, but look, I mean, I try and play a bunch of sports. I play a lot of basketball and soccer, and when I have the chance, I play a little bit of music. Since I've been traveling, I bought a ukulele, and so I've been learning a couple songs on the ukulele. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I love what I do. I end up doing a lot of just like long walks and like listening to podcasts or dropping voice notes to my team along that and things. And so, it may not be fully unplugging from work, but it's a little bit of less structured, and more creative time. And so, that's one of the advantages of being remote. I try and spend as much time as I can outdoors. I would be outdoors in this doing this podcast if there wasn't too much background noise, but that's been one of my solaces for sure.
Well, it's good to hear that you do try and take some downtime to recharge, as it were. But look, I really want to thank you. It's been an incredibly unique episode to cover a topic we've not been exposed to before. And what I will say is our commitment to you is that the Guinness is on us when you do set foot in Dublin once again. I can't wait.
Thank you very much. This is a lot of fun too. You guys had a unique set of questions and dug into a lot of things. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we heard it. The Guinness is on Ross. And yeah, look, this is undoubtedly a rocket ship. We're humbled and honored to have you on the show, and to for our listeners to kind of understand what you do and hear about you personally and your growth story. And if it's okay with you, we might have you back on the show at some stage to update us on your progress.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. Maybe we could even do it in person next time I'm in Dublin. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be super. Okay, be well, be safe, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Great to connect with all of you. Take care, Ross. John.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.